In a city where violence had become routine, where school shootings filled the news, one man stood between armed criminals and 30 innocent children. He wasn't a police officer. He wasn't a security guard. He wasn't trained for combat. He was just a doorman, a 52-year-old man who checked IDs and opened doors. But on one morning, in 5 terrifying minutes, he became something else entirely. He became a hero. This is the story of Robert Bobby Coleman, 52 years old, school doorman for 8 years, former construction worker, grandfather of 3, a man everyone passed by every day, but nobody really saw. Bobby worked at Lincoln Elementary School in a struggling neighborhood. Not the kind of school you see in movies. No fancy technology, no big budget. Just hard-working teachers trying to make a difference and kids trying to get an education despite everything working against them. Every morning, Bobby arrived at 6:30 a.m., unlocked the doors, turned on the lights, made coffee for the teachers, and by 7 a.m., he was at his post by the main entrance. "Good morning, Mr. Coleman." "Morning, kids. Have a great day." "Thanks, Bobby." The same routine, the same greetings, the same smile for 8 years. Bobby wasn't just a doorman. He knew every student's name, knew which kids needed extra encouragement, knew which families were struggling. He kept granola bars in his desk for kids who came to school hungry. He had Band-Aids for scraped knees. He had kind words for heavy hearts. To the administrators, he was just the doorman. To the teachers, he was helpful staff. But to the kids, Bobby was family. And on a Tuesday morning in March, that would mean everything. Before we continue with Bobby's incredible story, I want to ask you something. If you're listening to this right now, you're part of something special. This channel tells stories of invisible heroes, real people doing extraordinary things that the world needs to hear. If Bobby's story is already touching your heart, please hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you never miss a story, and give this video a thumbs up. It helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories. And here's something I'd love to know. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment right now with your city and country. Are you in New York, London, Tokyo? Let me know. I read every single comment, and I love knowing that these stories are reaching people all around the world. All right, let's get back to Bobby's story, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Tuesday, March 14th, 2023, 7:42 a.m. Bobby was at his usual spot, main entrance, coffee in hand. The morning rush was slowing down. Most kids were already in their classrooms. A few stragglers were still coming in. Late buses, oversleeping, the usual. The sun was shining. It was going to be a beautiful day. Or so everyone thought. Bobby saw a car pull up, black sedan, tinted windows. Nothing unusual in itself. Parents dropped kids off in all kinds of cars. But something made Bobby pause. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was 8 years of watching people come and go. Maybe it was something else. But Bobby felt it. That feeling when something isn't right. The car doors opened. 3 men got out, all wearing dark clothes, hoodies pulled up, faces partially covered with masks. Bobby's heart started racing. In 2023, masks weren't unusual. COVID was still fresh in everyone's mind. But something about these men was wrong. The way they moved, the way they looked around, the way their hands were hidden. And then Bobby saw it. Under one man's jacket, the unmistakable shape, a gun. Time slowed down. Bobby's mind raced through options. He could run, he could hide, he could lock himself in his office and call 911. But there were children inside. 30 students in the classroom closest to the entrance. Miss Rodriguez's 3rd grade class. 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, kids who trusted that school was safe. Bobby looked at the men. looked at the school door behind him, and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He stepped in front of the door, spread his arms wide, and blocked the entrance. "Gentlemen," Bobby said, his voice somehow steady despite his racing heart, "this is a school. You can't come in here." The three men stopped, looked at each other, then at Bobby. One of them laughed. "Old man, get out of the way." "No," Bobby said simply, "not happening." The man pulled out his gun, pointed it directly at Bobby's chest. "I said, move." Bobby didn't move, couldn't move even if he wanted to, because moving meant those men got inside. Moving meant those children were in danger. "Shoot me if you have to," Bobby said quietly, "but you're not getting past me." Inside the school, Miss Rodriguez was teaching multiplication. Her 28 third graders were focused on their worksheets, some struggling, some breezing through, all completely unaware of what was happening outside. But Bobby knew. Bobby saw the fury in the gunman's eyes, saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the other two men pulling out their own weapons. In that moment, Bobby thought of everything: his daughter, his 3 grandkids, his wife of 30 years waiting at home, the retirement they had planned, the trips they wanted to take. But he also thought of little Maria Rodriguez, always the first to say good morning, of Tommy Chen, who had finally started smiling after his parents' divorce, of Jasmine Williams, who dreamed of being a teacher, of all 30 kids in that classroom. And Bobby stood his ground. "You deaf, old man?" the gunman screamed. "Move!" "Make me," Bobby said. What happened next happened in seconds, but felt like hours. The gunman raised his weapon higher. Bobby saw his finger pull the trigger, saw the muzzle flash, heard the deafening bang that echoed through the empty schoolyard. But Bobby didn't fall. The bullet missed. Whether by miracle or the gunman's poor aim, Bobby would never know. It hit the brick wall beside the door. Chunks of brick exploded. The sound was deafening. And Bobby did something nobody expected. Instead of running, instead of ducking, he charged forward. A 52-year-old doorman charged 3 armed men. Bobby had worked construction for 25 years before becoming a doorman. His hands were still strong, his body still solid, and his determination was unbreakable. He grabbed the gunman's wrist, twisted. The gun fell. Before the other 2 men could react, Bobby had the first man in a headlock, using him as a shield. "Run!" Bobby screamed toward the school. "Lock down, now!" Inside, Miss Rodriguez heard the gunshot, heard Bobby scream, and without hesitation, she hit the panic button, installed after the last school shooting in a neighboring district. Alarms blared, steel doors automatically locked. The school went into immediate lockdown protocol. The 2 other gunmen tried to rush past Bobby, but he had positioned himself perfectly. The narrow entrance, the locked door behind him, they couldn't get past without going through him. And Bobby wasn't moving. One man tried to tackle him. Bobby, still holding the first gunman, used his momentum to throw both men off balance. Years of construction work had taught him leverage, had taught him how to move weight, had taught him how to hold his ground. But there were 3 of them and 1 of him, and they were armed and young and desperate. A fist hit Bobby's face. He tasted blood. Another blow to his ribs. The air rushed out of his lungs. A kick to his leg. He stumbled but didn't fall. Just 5 minutes, Bobby thought. Hold them for 5 minutes. Police will come. Just 5 minutes. The gunman Bobby had disarmed scrambled for his weapon. Bobby kicked it away. It skittered across the pavement, out of reach. Another shot rang out. This one hit the door behind Bobby. The bullet embedded in the metal, inches from where children had been standing minutes before. Bobby grabbed a trash can, one of those heavy metal ones bolted near the entrance, and swung it like a weapon. It connected with one gunman's shoulder. The man screamed in pain. But they were overwhelming him, 3 against 1. Bobby felt his strength fading, felt blood running down his face, felt his breath coming in ragged gasps. And then he heard it, the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. The school's silent alarm had worked. Police were 3 blocks away, 2 blocks, 1 block. The gunmen heard it too. Panic crossed their faces. "We gotta go," one shouted. "Not without," another started. "Now!" They ran, left their weapons, left Bobby bleeding on the ground, ran to their car and sped off, tires screeching. Bobby collapsed against the door. His door. The door he'd protected. The door those men never got through. Police cars screeched into the parking lot. Officers rushed out. "Freeze! Hands up!" But the car was already gone, fleeing the scene. Officers called it in. Pursuit initiated. But right now, their priority was the man bleeding on the ground. "Sir, are you okay? Sir, can you hear me?" Bobby looked up at the officer, smiled through the blood. "The kids," he whispered. "Are the kids okay?" The officer looked confused. "Sir, we need to get you medical attention." "The kids," Bobby repeated, louder now. "Are they safe?" Another officer checked his radio, spoke to someone inside the school, turned back to Bobby. "All students and staff are safe. Lockdown successful. Nobody got inside." Bobby closed his eyes, let out a breath he'd been holding. "Good," he whispered. "Good." And then he passed out. Bobby woke up in a hospital bed. His wife, Margaret, was holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "You idiot," she said through tears. "You wonderful, brave, stupid idiot." Bobby tried to smile. His face hurt. Everything hurt. "How long was I out?" 4 hours. You have a concussion, 3 broken ribs. Your left eye is swollen shut. You need stitches on your forehead and cheek, and you're going to be black and blue for weeks." "But I'm alive," Bobby said. "Barely," Margaret sobbed. "Bobby, you could have died. They had guns. They could have killed you." "I know," Bobby said quietly. "But Maggie, there were 30 kids in Miss Rodriguez's classroom. 30 babies. I couldn't let those men get inside. I couldn't." Margaret squeezed his hand. I know, baby. And I'm so proud of you, and so angry at you, and so grateful you're alive." The door opened. A doctor entered, followed by a police detective. "Mr. Coleman," the doctor said, "you're incredibly lucky. Your injuries are painful, but not life-threatening. You'll make a full recovery." "What about the gunmen?" Bobby asked the detective. "We got them," the detective said with satisfaction. "Caught them 15 minutes after they fled. They're in custody. And thanks to you, Mr. Coleman, they're facing multiple charges: attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted armed invasion. They're going away for a very long time." "Who were they?" Bobby asked. "Why did they come to the school?" The detective's face darkened. "Gang retaliation. One of the students' older brothers testified against their gang leader. They came to send a message, to hurt the kid's younger sister. She's in Miss Rodriguez's class." Bobby's blood ran cold. Little Sophia Martinez, always quiet, always scared. Now he understood why. "They came to hurt an 8-year-old girl?" Bobby whispered, horror in his voice. "And whoever else got in their way," the detective confirmed. "Mr. Coleman, you didn't just save 30 students.
You saved teachers, staff, yourself. If they had gotten inside. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The news spread fast. By that evening, every news station in the city was covering the story.
Unarmed doorman stops armed invasion of elementary school. Unarmed man fights off 3 gunmen to save students. 52-year-old school employee single-handedly prevents tragedy. But Bobby didn't want to talk to reporters, didn't want attention, didn't want to be on TV. "I just did what anyone would do," he told every journalist who called. "I'm not a hero, I'm just a doorman." But the families disagreed. The students disagreed. The community disagreed. 3 days later, Bobby was released from the hospital. He expected to go home and rest, maybe return to work in a few weeks once he healed. Instead, when he and Margaret pulled up to their house, he found something he never expected. Cars, dozens of cars, lining their street, in their driveway, around the corner. People standing in their yard, on their porch, holding signs. "What the?" Bobby started. And then he saw them. 30 children, Miss Rodriguez's entire 3rd grade class, standing in a line, each holding a handmade sign. "Thank you, Mr. Bobby. Our hero. You saved us. We love you." Bobby started crying, right there in the car, tears streaming down his bruised face. Margaret squeezed his hand. "Come on, hero, your kids are waiting." Bobby got out slowly. His ribs screamed in protest, but he walked toward the children. They rushed forward. Carefully, Miss Rodriguez had obviously warned them about his injuries, and hugged him gently. Little Sophia Martinez, the girl who had been the target, looked up at him with huge eyes. "Mr. Bobby, you saved me. Those bad men wanted to hurt me, but you stopped them." Bobby knelt down, wincing at the pain. "Sophia, sweetheart, you're safe, and you're going to stay safe, I promise." "Are you coming back to school?" Tommy Chin asked. "It's not the same without you." "We miss you," Maria Rodriguez added. "Nobody gives us high fives in the morning like you do." Bobby looked at all 30 faces. Faces he saw every day. Faces he'd protected. Faces that were alive because he'd made a choice. "I'll be back," he promised. "Give me a few weeks to heal, and I'll be right back at that door. Deal?" "Deal!" they all shouted together. Behind the children, Bobby saw parents, lots of parents. Some he recognized from morning drop-off, others he'd never met, all with tears in their eyes. One father stepped forward. "Mr. Coleman, I'm Sophia's father, Carlos Martinez." He could barely speak through his tears. "You saved my little girl's life. Those animals came for her because I did the right thing, because I testified. And you stood between them and my baby. How do I ever thank you for that?" Bobby shook his head. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Martinez. You did the brave thing. You stood up to criminals. You're the hero here." "No," Carlos said firmly. "You're both heroes. But what you did, an unarmed man facing 3 guns, I'll never forget it. My family will never forget it." Another parent spoke up. "My son, Tommy, he struggles at school, learning disabilities. Kids make fun of him. But you, Mr. Coleman, you always tell him he's smart. You always encourage him. And now you saved his life. You're the best man I've ever known." Parent after parent shared stories, how Bobby remembered birthdays, how he helped kids tie shoes, how he gave words of encouragement, how he made school feel safe. "You weren't just protecting students that day," one mother said. "You were protecting your family, because that's what you made them feel like, family." The community wanted to do something big, something lasting. A week after the incident, Bobby was invited to a city council meeting. He didn't want to go, hated attention, but Margaret convinced him. When they arrived, the council chambers were packed, standing room only, every seat filled. The mayor stood at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, We're here today to honor an extraordinary act of heroism. Robert Coleman, please come forward." Bobby walked slowly to the front, still healing. The entire chamber rose to their feet, a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. The mayor waited for silence. "Mr. Coleman, on March 14th, you faced an impossible situation. 3 armed men, intent on violence, and you, an unarmed school doorman, stood your ground. You protected 30 children and prevented an unimaginable tragedy. The city of Lincoln owes you a debt we can never fully repay, but today we want to try." The mayor held up a proclamation. "By the power vested in me, I declare March 14th as Bobby Coleman Day in our city, a day to remember that heroism doesn't come from weapons or badges. It comes from courage, from love, from one ordinary person making an extraordinary choice." The chamber erupted in applause again. "But that's not all," the mayor continued. "The Lincoln Elementary School Building Committee has made a decision. Effective immediately, the main entrance you protected will be renamed Coleman's Gate. A plaque will be installed telling your story, so that every student who enters that school for generations to come will know about the man who loved them enough to risk everything." Bobby was crying. He wasn't ashamed. These were good tears, grateful tears. "And finally," the mayor said, "the parents of Lincoln Elementary have established the Bobby Coleman Scholarship Fund. This fund will provide college scholarships to students from struggling families, starting with a donation of $50,000 and growing every year. Your heroism will help children for decades to come." Bobby couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Margaret held him as he sobbed. But perhaps the greatest honor came from the kids themselves. 2 weeks after the incident, Bobby returned to work. His doctor had cleared him. His ribs were still sore, but healing. The bruises were fading to yellow and green. He could open both eyes again. He arrived at 6:30 a.m., like always, unlocked the doors,
Turned on the lights, made coffee, and at 7 a.m. he went to his post. But something was different. The door, his door, the door he'd defended. Above it, newly installed, was a sign. Coleman's Gate, in honor of Robert Bobby Coleman, who stood here on March 14th, 2023. When courage was needed most, one man was enough. Bobby stared at it, tears running down his face again. He seemed to cry a lot these days. The first bus pulled up. Kids started getting off. And when they saw Bobby, they erupted. "Mr. Bobby, you're back!" They ran to him, hugged him carefully, high-fived him, told him how much they missed him. All morning, students, teachers, and parents stopped to hug him, to thank him, to tell him they loved him. Ms. Rodriguez brought her class to the entrance during recess. 30 third graders, standing in neat lines. "Mr. Bobby," Maria said, "we made something for you." They handed him a book, handmade, bound with yarn. The cover said, "Our Hero, Mr. Bobby Coleman." Inside, each student had drawn a picture and written a message. "Thank you for being brave. You are my hero. I love you, Mr. Bobby. You saved us. I want to be like you when I grow up." Page after page of love, of gratitude, of children who understood, in their own way, what Bobby had done for them. Bobby sat down right there on the floor, surrounded by 30 kids, and read every page, laughing through tears, hugging kids, telling them they were the brave ones for going to school every day despite everything. Sophia Martinez, the girl who had been the target, sat in Bobby's lap. "Mr. Bobby, I'm not scared anymore, because I know you'll protect us." Bobby hugged her gently. "Sophia, I'll always be here, always. But you know what? You're strong, you're brave, and you don't need me to protect you. You've got courage inside you. I just gave you a little time to find it."
The gunmen went to trial 6 months later. All three pleaded guilty. Each received 25 years in prison without possibility of parole. At the sentencing hearing, Bobby was asked to speak. He stood in front of the three men who had nearly killed him. "I'm not here for revenge," Bobby said quietly. "I'm not here to celebrate your imprisonment. I'm here because I want you to understand something." The three men, now in orange jumpsuits and chains, looked at him. "That day, you came to hurt an 8-year-old girl. You came to hurt innocent children. You came with guns and violence to a place where kids should feel safe. And I need you to know you failed. You failed because I wouldn't let you pass. You failed because love is stronger than hate. You failed because one unarmed man with everything to lose chose to stand in your way." Bobby paused. "I hope you spend your time in prison thinking about that. Thinking about how your choices led you here. And I hope, someday, you find a way to make different choices, better choices. Because everybody deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment." The judge nodded appreciatively. "Mr. Coleman, your grace is remarkable. Not many people could stand before those who tried to kill them and still speak of redemption." "Your Honor," Bobby said, "those men wanted to take life. I'm not going to respond by taking hope. Everybody deserves hope." A year after the incident, Bobby still works at Lincoln Elementary, still arrives at 6:30 a.m., still makes coffee, still gives high fives and words of encouragement. But some things have changed. Coleman's Gate is famous now. Visitors come to see it, to take pictures, to hear the story. The Bobby Coleman Scholarship Fund has grown to over $300,000. 15 students have received scholarships so far. 15 kids who might not have gone to college now have that chance. And Bobby is still just a doorman. That's what he tells everyone. But everybody knows the truth. Bobby Coleman taught an entire city what courage looks like. He showed that heroism doesn't require youth or strength or weapons. It requires heart. It requires love. It requires being willing to stand between evil and innocence and say, "Not today, not on my watch." 3 years later, Bobby finally retired. He was 55 years old. His ribs ached on cold days. His scars reminded him of that morning. But he was alive, happy, grateful. On his last day, the entire school assembled in the gymnasium. Every student, every teacher, every staff member. Over 600 people. The principal presented Bobby with a plaque. "Robert Coleman, Guardian, Hero, Family." The students sang a song they'd written for him, about courage, about love, about an ordinary man who did an ordinary thing. And then Sophia Martinez, now 11 years old, stood to speak. "Mr. Bobby," she said, her voice clear and strong, "when I was 8 years old, bad men came to hurt me. I was their target, but you stood in their way. You didn't know me very well then. You probably didn't even remember my name, but you protected me anyway, because that's who you are." Sophia's voice cracked with emotion. "Because of you, I got to turn 9 and 10 and 11. Because of you, I got to learn to ride a bike, to make friends, to dream about my future. Because of you, I'm alive. Mr. Bobby, I'm going to do something with my life. I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to help people just like you helped me. And when people ask me why, I'm going to tell them about the doorman who loved kids so much that he faced guns without hesitation." The gymnasium was silent, except for the sound of people crying. "You're my hero, Mr. Bobby. You always will be. Thank you for my life." Bobby stood up slowly, walked to Sophia, hugged her tight. "Sophia, you've already made me proud. Every day you walk through Coleman's Gate with your head held high, you make me proud. You're going to do amazing things, sweetheart, and I'll be cheering you on every step of the way. So, what can we learn from Bobby Coleman's story? First, heroism is a choice. Bobby wasn't born brave. He wasn't trained for combat. He was just a man who, when the moment came, chose love over fear, chose others over himself, chose to stand when running would have been easier. Every one of us faces moments like that. Maybe not armed gunmen, but moments when we can choose courage or comfort. Bobby chose courage. Second, never underestimate the ordinary person. Bobby was just a doorman. People walked past him every day without a second glance. But inside that ordinary man was extraordinary courage. Inside that humble doorman was a hero waiting for his moment. Who are the ordinary people in your life? The doorman, the janitor, the cashier, the waiter? Look at them again. Really see them. Because inside every ordinary person might be an extraordinary hero. Third, small acts of love prepare us for big acts of courage. Bobby didn't suddenly become loving on March 14th. He'd been showing love to those kids every day for 8 years. The high fives, the granola bars, the encouragement, the kindness. Those small acts built something inside him, a connection, a love so strong that when the moment came, there was no question. He would protect those kids. Period. Your small acts of kindness today might be preparing you for something bigger tomorrow. And fourth, one person can make a difference. Bobby was alone, unarmed, against 3 gunmen. The odds were impossible. Logic said he should run. Self-preservation said he should hide. But Bobby stood his ground. One person. And because of that one person, 30 children lived. Teachers lived. A school remained safe. Never think you're too small to matter. Never think one person can't change everything. Bobby Coleman proved that wrong. Where are they now, 3 years later? Bobby Coleman is 55 years old, retired, spending time with his grandkids, volunteering at the community center, living a quiet life, still insisting he's not a hero. But everyone who meets him knows the truth. Sophia Martinez is 11 years old, straight-A student, captain of her soccer team, dreams of being a social worker to help kids in danger, speaks at anti-violence rallies, tells Bobby's story to inspire others. Miss Rodriguez still teaches 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. She says she'll never forget the sound of that gunshot, and she'll never forget the man who stood between her students and danger. The 30 students from that classroom are growing up. Some are in middle school now. All of them remember that day, and all of them remember Mr. Bobby. Coleman's Gate stands at Lincoln Elementary. Thousands of students walk through it every year. All of them learn the story. All of them know about the Doorman who loved kids enough to die for them. The Bobby Coleman Scholarship Fund continues to grow. 25 students have received scholarships now. 25 futures changed because a doorman was brave. This story isn't just about one man. It's about all of us. It's about the choice we make when courage is required. It's about loving people enough to protect them. It's about standing up when standing up is hard. Bobby Coleman was just a doorman, but just is the wrong word, because there's no such thing as just when it comes to human beings. That doorman had a name, Bobby Coleman. That doorman had courage, extraordinary courage. That doorman had love, love strong enough to face death. An invisible hero, until the moment he wasn't invisible anymore, until the moment everyone saw what had been there all along. A good man, a brave man, a hero. And now I want to ask you something. If you've made it this far in Bobby's story, you understand something important. You understand that heroes are real, that courage exists, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. But here's the question: what will you do with that understanding? Will you walk past the ordinary people in your life without seeing them? Or will you look at them differently now? Will you run from the moments that require courage, or will you stand your ground like Bobby did? Will you think you're too small to matter, or will you remember that one person changed everything? Bobby Coleman didn't wake up on March 14th planning to be a hero. He woke up planning to be a doorman, to check IDs, to give high fives, to make kids smile. But when the moment came, he was ready, because he'd been preparing his whole life through small acts of love. You're preparing too. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every time you choose love over fear. You're preparing for your moment. And when that moment comes, and it will come in some form for all of us, what will you do? Will you run? Will you hide? Will you say, "Not my problem"? Or will you stand like Bobby stood, spread your arms wide, and say, "Not today, not on my watch"? This was the story of Bobby Coleman, a doorman who became a hero. But maybe it's also your story, the story you haven't written yet, the story waiting for your moment of courage. Because invisible heroes are everywhere. Sometimes they check IDs at school entrances. Sometimes they stand between evil and innocence. Sometimes they save 30 lives with 5 minutes of courage. And sometimes they are you, just waiting for your moment. Bobby found his moment. What will yours be? The end. If Bobby's story inspired you, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel. We tell stories like this every week, stories of real heroes, stories that restore faith in humanity. Don't miss them. Second, share this video. Someone in your life needs to hear Bobby's story today. Someone needs to be reminded that courage is real, that heroes exist, that one person can make a difference. Share it with them. And third, leave a comment. Tell me, what would you do in Bobby's situation? Have you ever had a moment that required courage? What did you do? I read every comment, and I want to hear your story. Remember, you're not just a listener. You're part of this community, a community that believes in heroes, that celebrates courage, that knows ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being the kind of person who cares about stories like Bobby's. Until next time, keep your eyes open, because invisible heroes are all around us. We just have to see them.